Blip Bloppity Bloop.
Hello there, welcome to the first episode of Season 2 of Blip Bloppity Bloop, a Star Wars podcast. I'm your host, Nate Hawley, and with me is Jedi Knight of the Frontier, Will Heckaman.
We are all the Republic.
We're finally back. To our new listeners, welcome. Will and I started this podcast over a year ago, and we only got 6 episodes in before life got in the way, and COVID happened, and then, well, it's been quite a year for all of us, but we're finally ready to get back behind the microphone and start producing new bi-weekly episodes. So we're really excited for the new season. We have episodes planned all the way through the end of the year, and we're really confident that the show is going to be better than ever. For starters, we have new intro music. The new theme was produced by our lovely in-house musical droid D3N1, so huge thanks to D3. And you might have noticed that we have new cover art. Huge thanks to our friend HavenWolf for their design. We love it, and we hope you guys like it too.
For our new listeners, Blip Bloppity Bloop is just a show where we talk about whatever the Blip Bloppity Bloop we want about our favorite fantasy universe. This season, we'll be covering a variety of topics in the Star Wars galaxy, and we'll be joined by some talented guests. With all that said, let's jump into hyperspace for our next segment, Bustin' with Happiness. Take it away, Jar Jar.
Mr. Bustin' with Happiness.
Now, this is the part of the show where we talk about something from that galaxy far, far away that made us happy this week. So, Will, what have you been enjoying in the world of Star Wars?
Well, as Nate knows already, I've recently got back into Lego, and I ordered the Lego TIE Fighter from this year, as well as the Lego X-Wing, which has not come yet. But I was able to put the Lego TIE Fighter together, just finished it last night, and though I was not impressed with the pictures I saw online, or the box itself, looked a little squished. The build was fantastic. It's very solid, I want to say, and I really enjoy it after actually seeing it in person and having it. And it doesn't look as bad as I thought initially. I mean, it's a toy, so I mean, right. It doesn't have to be perfect. But it's definitely brought joy to my life this week, especially last night finishing it. Or no, it was this morning I finished it. I awesome. Did a bit last night and then this morning.
Very cool.
How about you, Nate? What have you been enjoying in the world of Star Wars?
Yeah, so I recently finished rewatching Rebels for the umpteenth millionth time. So, of course, that got me all in my feels. But then I jumped back into Resistance, which this is my first rewatch of Resistance. I haven't watched it again since the show ended. So I've been trucking along with that. And it was nice kind of revisiting those old shows. Not old shows, just the old memories of watching the show. Yeah. It's so fun, and gosh darn it if it isn't so friggin' beautiful. The animation is just gorgeous in that show. But yeah, so that's what I've been enjoying. Now, before we get into our main topic, I wanted to address a more serious matter that's being discussed in our fandom right now, particularly with some of the hateful comments that have been thrown at Christina Ariel, the new host of the High Republic show on the Star Wars YouTube channel, and with everything, the whole mess going around about Gina Carano. So we just want to be very clear as we enter this new season of our podcast. If you harass Star Wars creators, commentators, or anyone else, we don't want you in this space. If you are a part of the fandom menace or participate in their racist, sexist, transphobic rhetoric, we don't want you here either. Take the time you are going to use to listen to this podcast and educate yourself on the experiences of the people you have harmed. We want to create a space where marginalized people feel safe to express their fandom without judgment or condemnation. To those people, we just want to say that we hear you, we support you, and we love you. The Force is with you all. With that, Will's going to lead us into our main topic of the day.
So, just like we're launching into a new era of our podcast, Star Wars has entered a new era with the publishing initiative formerly known as Project Luminous, now revealed to be the High Republic. And we couldn't think of a better way to kick off Season 2 than to do a deep dive into this first wave of brand new Star Wars stories. So without further ado, let's dive in.
Finn, let me learn you something big.
All right, so the High Republic. So for those of you who don't know, this is a new publishing initiative by Lucasfilm, and it's being led by 5 authors: Charles Soule, Justina Ireland, Claudia Gray, Cavan Scott, and Daniel Jose Older. And the whole deal is this new era of storytelling, a huge interconnected story across several different publishing media that takes place 200 years before the Phantom Menace in this new era that they're calling the High Republic. This is the Jedi at their height. They've used phrases like Jedi Knights of the Round Table, that this is like the Camelot era of a galaxy far, far away. And so there's been several stories. We just kind of got through the first wave of these stories, not the first phase, because they announced a couple weeks ago, I think now, that there are going to be 3 phases to this story spanning multiple years. We have no idea how many years. So we're in phase 1, which is called Light of the Jedi. And we just finished the first kind of wave of phase 1 with the second wave coming out later in the summer. So we thought we'd talk about each of the stories, kind of go in release order. But before we do that, Will, I just wanted to get some like general thoughts from you. Maybe like, how are you feeling going in? Just general thoughts.
I was excited going into this. I've been ready for, them expanding the universe, not just being kept in this close area of time and revisiting the same 3, time periods over and over. And it's just great to explore, earlier times without being drugged down by events we already know. And so it's almost like a clean slate has been started and we don't have to worry about how it's going to tie in. And I'm so ecstatic about that. And I cannot wait to keep going through more of this. I just finished the first book yesterday and all I can say is I want more.
Yeah, absolutely. I've really loved it. I've read it all, all the stuff they've put out now, including the little children's picture book that they did.
Yeah.
And yeah, I love it. I honestly, I mean, I need to let it sit more, but this might be my new favorite era of Star Wars. It just, everything is so fresh and new.
Oh, yeah.
While being familiar at the same time, it doesn't feel like it's not Star Wars.
Oh, yeah.
But it absolutely feels like Star Wars, and I love. I want to talk just kind of about just generally about the era, how we're feeling about the world that they've created, which is mostly set up in Charles Soule's Light of the Jedi. And the other projects kind of use that as a jumping off point to flesh out the rest of the world.
Right.
But yeah, they've described this as like the Camelot of Star Wars. And they actually meant that in the 2 senses of Camelot. So you have obviously the Arthurian Camelot, Knights of the Round Table, going on epic magical quests and everything. And, a united Britain and everything. But it also the period of American history that we refer to as Camelot, which is the Kennedy administration.
Yeah.
When JFK was elected, and there was just a sense of hope and optimism in the country. Obviously, not for many marginalized people, like that. It wasn't great for everybody, but you just got the general sense that America was ready to, we had just gotten through 2 world wars. We were ready to kind of do new things. We were going to put a man on the moon. We were going to expand and do great works, which that'll come up later.
Yep.
But so they wanted to reflect both of those ideas in this new era of storytelling, and I absolutely felt that.
Same. I can definitely agree with that. I hadn't heard the that they wanted to reflect it in the American history as well, but as soon as you said it, I went, oh yeah, no, that makes total sense.
Yeah, and you just get a sense, like, people at that time, we trusted our leaders. JFK was immensely popular.
Yep.
And we really trusted him. And at the same time, in the High Republic, we now have a new chancellor, Lena Soule, who is actually a good chancellor.
Right.
And that's on. I was listening to an interview with Charles Soule, and as they were throwing ideas around, that was the concept that she started with. Like, before she even had a name, it was just the good chancellor.
Right.
And because they wanted to show someone who could do this job right. They didn't explicitly mention this, but I think it even more reflects just how evil Palpatine is when you see, oh, this is what Palpatine was supposed to be.
Right.
This is the person that the galaxy needed. It's
just meeting Chancellor Soule. That's exactly it. To where I literally went, oh, this is right. This is the best example of a leader that I've seen in a long time in any literature, really.
Yeah.
And it's just, I was so impressed with how well they built her character, and while being a part of a democracy, she just feels so regal. But she's definitely doing everything for the greater good.
Yeah, absolutely. And she, I just love her. And I know I compared, I brought up the Kennedy connection, but I really feel like Lena Soule in a way is like the Galaxy Far Far Away's FDR. Like,
yeah,
she reflects a lot of the qualities that he did as president. Even I'll go ahead and mention it now. Like, she has this program called Great Works, where she wants the galaxy to do great things. Like, the Republic is coming together. They're bringing in new worlds every day. There's this real sense of collective optimism, and she wants to reflect that. So she commissions this program called Great Works. The most notable of that being Starlight Beacon, which we'll talk plenty about later. But FDR did a similar thing. I forget what the name of the program was, but he led a similar program here in the States with, that's where it was through that program that a lot of our, like, interstate highways and a lot of these big things, monuments, different things that were built, advancements in technology, lots of great works happening. And I really got that vibe from her. And I know I have heard, listening to other podcasts, some people don't quite trust her. But honestly, I do. And maybe that's naive of me, but I just feel like, especially comparing her to Palpatine, like, they're not going to do the evil chancellor again.
Right.
And I do trust her.
I think it's just inherently Star Wars to have an evil chancellor, or
Mm.
to, because as fans, that's what we're used to. We're used to the politicians in Star Wars being corrupt and being the true, evil in the galaxy often.
Yeah.
And so we don't trust any of the politicians we meet unless, it's
Padme.
Mothma or Padme or Bail Organa.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of they need to earn our trust first. And it
Mm-hmm.
takes a lot to earn that trust because of Palpatine.
Yeah. Which I think is, in a way, you bring that up is kind of an interesting, like, meta commentary on, how we look at politicians in the real world.
Yeah.
Of, like, yeah, they do need to earn our trust. Like, we shouldn't be, like, I totally understand the mistrust of Lena Soule because of what we've seen politicians do in Star Wars in the past. The same way personally, in my politics, don't really trust politicians here because of what we've seen them do in the past. So politicians have to earn our trust. And in the same way, they've had to do that in Star Wars. And for me, I think Lena Soule absolutely did.
Yeah, I can agree with you there.
Yeah, I just really loved her. And that isn't to say I don't think she won't make mistakes. I think actually it's probably very likely that she will.
Yeah.
And she is, I don't even know if I'd call this a character flaw, but she is very sure of what she wants. And I think that can be both for good and for ill. I think, she may think that something she's going to do is for the best of the galaxy.
Right.
And it won't be. And people will tell her that it won't be, and she won't listen. I think that's definitely a possibility for the future. But for now, I absolutely trust her. And I didn't even mean to go on a tangent about
Right.
Lena Soule, but I just kind of want to talk about the era. But
well, I mean, we've now set the picture for this is the state of the galaxy, and they're prospering right now, and so just having this good chancellor really shows it's a prosperous republic, a high republic.
Yeah, and it's really cool because we've never seen, even in the prequels, we've never seen the galaxy so prosperous and optimistic. Because even in the prequels, I mean, we open with the Jedi going to Tatooine, and they see the slavery and things like that, and so it already opens on kind of a dour note, and we see we're shown a lot of politics, and we're shown that the politics don't work, and
Right.
all these things. So things are very broken in the time of the prequels, whereas now during the High Republic they're working, and this is the galaxy as it should be, which is really fascinating to me, because on the one hand you almost think that it maybe shouldn't work as well as it does, because on the one hand you might think, well, there's no conflict there. Like, if everything's awesome, what are the Jedi going to be up against? And we'll talk about the Nile more later. Their new foes. But it's really interesting, and seeing Jedi who, like, even though we see Jedi who are plenty proficient with a lightsaber, most of them have never had to use it.
Yeah.
In their lives. Most of them go their whole lives without ever having to use it. Like, that's crazy.
Right. It's very much they keep hammering that nail that the lightsaber is the last it's the final, it's the last straw, to where if diplomacy doesn't work, and they all try diplomacy first, and if using the Force to help sway a mind, or using the Force to help control a situation doesn't work, then the lightsaber is the that's your final defense. And that's the other thing, is that The Jedi are shown more as a defense than an offense.
Yeah, absolutely. And that position is reflected everywhere.
Oh yeah.
One of the things I absolutely want to hear you talk about is how that's reflected in their ships. The new Jedi vectors, and I know how much you love ships, and I bet it was really cool for you to read all the descriptions of the new ships.
Oh yeah, no, I ate those parts up, and my mind just goes into this immense just image of the cockpit inside, and seeing how the vectors work and how nimble they are and how it's supposed to work along with the Jedi's power,
Yeah,
and how the lightsaber itself is a key to the power, to the you know
to the weapon
to the
system.
weapon system. Yes, exactly. Reflecting again that the lightsaber is, your final, uh choice.
Yeah,
They still don't use those weapon systems unless they absolutely have to. And just those moments of, oh, now I have to go on the offensive, and they finally whip out their lightsaber and throw it on. It's called a lightsaber key in that
yeah,
instance, and it just, and their tactical readings light up the color of their blade, and that's so cool to me, of course.
yeah,
And how the ships are supposed to work together and go into what they call a drift, and all the
yeah,
Jedi can move together in the same maneuvers, and they're like impossible maneuvers. And one Jedi Vector can go up against a fleet of ships and almost get away unscathed, and that is
yeah,
just crazy. And they're not even being offensive; they're still being defensive. I'm gonna hit that anytime I can. Um,
yeah,
but the design, it's so sleek; it's almost like bug like. So when they do that drift, it's like a swarm of bugs.
yeah,
Um, and it just, the idea of how it flies through, and seeing it in the comic book just a little bit was really cool as well. I just wanted to see it on a screen though, because I think
yeah.
it'll be really neat to see that eventually.
And get the Lego set, of
Oh,
course.
of course, yeah. If they do a Lego set, I will buy it in a heartbeat. Um, and then they introduced the Republic Longbeam, which is one of their. It seems more of a working class ship than everything. It's got a maglock crane on it that they use to um, help with the great disaster and the emergencies, which we'll talk about later, I'm sure.
Yeah,
And that was just neat, describing how that works, to where you can have a crew of 3 or you can have a crew of 24, and it will still work just fine.
yeah. It was interesting. I got very much a like Tana V4,
Yeah.
blockade runner
Yes.
vibe from those ships. And they're very cool. And I did want to mention the vectors again, just real quick. Is one of the details I found really interesting is they're actually not even that heavily shielded.
No.
They're actually pretty lightly shielded, which I think really reflects the Jedi's trust in the Force at this time. Um, they are really in tune with the Force, in the Force, so much that they can trust that they can go out into space with barely any shields and potentially get into a firefight and come out unscathed, because they know the Force will protect them, which was really cool to see that kind of new, again, optimism is probably a word I'll say a lot throughout this podcast. Is just, there's optimism in the state of the galaxy, but also the Jedi have optimism in their trust of the Force.
Yeah. And yeah, that was such a great way to explain it. And it that's what amazed me so much with the Jedi, was how they were shown to be so in tune with the Force, and so um accepting of how the Force works rather than using the Force. They let the Force speak through them rather than trying to control it, more or less, I
Yeah,
feel.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned the Great Disaster. Now, before we go any further, I will say we are going to be talking spoilers for Charles Soule's The Light of the Jedi. If you don't want any spoilers, you maybe tune out or skip ahead. We'll probably talk some not as spoilery things later. But for now, we're going to go into full details about the book. So here's your last warning. But the Great Disaster is kind of the thing that kicks all this off. Everything's great. Even the first words of the book are all is well. And then you meet this character, Heckaman is the captain of the Legacy Run is the name of her ship, and it's like it's transporting a bunch of refugees. Not even, I'll say refugees. Yeah. They're looking for a better life out in the Outer Rim. They're like people on the wagon trail, trying
frontiersmen.
Going out west to hopefully, strike gold or, something along those lines. And that is another influence too that we'll probably mention later, is even though there is this sense of American optimism and, the Camelot vibe, there is also the Old West and going out on the frontier. In fact, they use those words, the frontier,
right,
plenty of times throughout all of these books. But yeah, so we meet this character, Heckaman, and she's really cool. She's kind of this, no nonsense captain who keeps everything in order. And for a moment, you think she's going to be the main character of the book.
Right, right.
When I was reading it, I was like, oh, this makes sense. Like, our main character won't be a Jedi and will be introduced to this new world of the Jedi through her eyes, and she'll be like our point of view. But then it all goes to heck, and because their ship comes across something in hyperspace which shouldn't be possible. Nope. And so then they maneuver to try to get out, and their ship gets ripped apart, and a lot of people die, including Heckaman.
Yep. I just when I got through that, that's like the end of the chapter, and I closed it, and I was in the middle of like the laundromat because that's where I do most of my reading, and I ended up just going, really, Charles?
Yeah.
Really? And I just, I got so attached to this one character so quick, and I couldn't help but picture like Jane Lynch.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It like that's who was in my mind the whole time, and that's the only actor like in real life that I've actually pictured in one of these roles in the book. And so like that's how like attached I was to this character so quick, and then my heart gets ripped out of my chest.
Yeah. And then Heckaman died, and it's like, what? And then you think, man, that was terrible. Okay, here's the real main character, and we meet this scan tech who's working on a space station in the Hetzal system.
Yep.
And he's really cute. Like, he wants to get off his shift so he can go ask this girl out that he's had feelings for a long time. And it's this really cute, like, he's just going through his day wanting to get off work really bad. And then the Legacy Run and all its broken pieces show up out of hyperspace. And then the scan tech dies.
Yep.
It's like, is everyone in this book going to die? I can't be attached to anyone.
Yeah, no, it was... Yeah, exactly. I'm just like, what are you doing? Why? Why build such great characters and intrigue in me, and just rip it out over and over again? Each time they started a new moment in this, in the beginning of the book, I'm sitting here thinking, all right, here we go. Now we're going to start to get, a little better. And it gets worse and worse
Yep.
and worse.
And what I love is at the beginning of each chapter of that first part, like the first third of the book, which is all about the great disaster. The beginning of each chapter has a countdown, so it's like 3 hours to impact, 20 minutes to impact, later on.
Yeah.
And so you really got that feel of that ticking clock.
Yes, I know.
Which I haven't really experienced that in a book before.
Right.
Like I get that all the time in movies, occasionally in television, but this is the first time in a book I was like stressed out, being like, what is going to happen when we hit 0?
Yeah, no, and so yeah, you're talking about the anxiety that countdown's giving you, but also like just in general, the book gave me so much anxiety that I'm just like, it's because they did this. They did this to where it's they kept introducing character you like and then wiping them off the board. And I just remember, especially once like the panic set in on Hetzel, that's where you start to be like, oh man, we've experienced a lot of this type of panic recently in
Yeah.
our own society. This is hitting close to home a lot more than I thought it would.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's now's as good a time as any to bring up just how timely this book was. Like, and it's crazy because like when Charles Soule was writing it, like, and they were coming up with these stories, like COVID-19 wasn't a thing. Like,
Yeah.
while he was writing, I think towards the end of his writing process, we were in the pandemic by then. But like for the most part, this was written before that, but just getting it now while we're in the midst of this global crisis, and just to have this sense of hope and optimism, and like in the midst of this great disaster,
Yeah.
man, I really needed this book right now.
Same. It really helped me out, and I just feel like, yeah, everything's been weighing down on so many people with the pandemic, with all these other crises we've experienced, and just this book really helped kind of, I don't know, just help me process some of my emotions through some of this stuff we've experienced in the past year alone.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was the first time I really felt like a Star Wars book, I don't know, like helped me,
Yeah.
Like, again, I love Star Wars, otherwise we wouldn't be doing this podcast. Uh, but and I do love the books, and I've read plenty, before the Disney buyout and plenty since. But I've never really gotten that sense from one of the books that like my life was actually improved by reading this book. And it was like, it really helped me out emotionally. And that's just huge props to Charles Soule for being able to accomplish something like that.
Yeah, he did a fantastic job, and just he might end up being my favorite author so far, just of anything I've read. Just the way he describes things, um and so early on in like chapter 4, even you get just the description of the Force through a Jedi's eyes, and it's and we get Avar Chris's, she reaches out into Force, and she senses it as a song, as a ballad.
Yeah.
And it pushes the story along, and it's so beautiful, but each Jedi sees it in a different way, and that might be quite possibly my favorite thing to come out of this book.
Yeah, it was so beautiful. And we've never really gotten that in Star Wars. Is like, well, I think a good chunk of it is because there's typically been so few Jedi,
Right.
from the originals into the sequels. With the prequels, there's a lot, but there's a war on, and that we didn't really have time to focus on the Jedi's personal connection to the Force.
Yeah.
And also, you know, you have the whole thing with the Jedi kind of losing their way and becoming, you know, more detached. And so those things may not have even been as personal anyway. But in this book, we really get to see, this thing that everyone in the universe is connected to. Everyone's connected to it in their own unique personal way. And it was just so beautiful. Yeah. Especially Avar Chris, you know, hearing it as a song and, you know, the song of the universe, and everyone has their own notes and harmonies and different things like that. Or her friend Elsar Mann, who experiences it as a sea, a deep, stormy ocean.
Yes.
That is vast and bottomless, and there's always more to explore the deeper you go. Or Buryaga, the sweetest little being of of a Wookiee Jedi.
I will die for Buryaga.
Yes. I just, at anytime Buryaga was in, I just kept feeling like that meme from Brooklyn Nine-Nine when Rosa's got the dog.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
like, I just met him, but if anything happened to him, I would kill everyone in this room and then myself.
Right. That's exactly it.
But he experiences it as a tree, as like the great
Yes.
tree of the universe, and we all have our own branches and twigs and roots and things.
Yeah, and so, you know, the Jedi arrive at Hetzal along with the Republic, and they were, you know, the Third Horizon is the ship they're um, based out of, essentially, that just came from the Starlight Beacon, one of the great
Yeah.
works we mentioned, and they just happen to be leaving Starlight Beacon just enough time to get to the Hetzal system to try and help save some lives, and people are evacuating the planet and the moons, and there's just all around confusion, and the Jedi go out there and they try and just, you know, save people, you know, get them off planet, get them out of the way of these pieces of ship that are just flying out of hyperspace that nobody can explain, and that are just hurtling towards civilization. And so we see them do amazing things, not just the Jedi, but also just members of the Republic doing, you know, regular things that they, you know, can do, but being heroes in it. And they're just, the way they're all connected and they sense it. And we meet Loden Greatstorm and Bel Zettifar, his Padawan.
Yeah.
And Loden Greatstorm, just a perfect name.
Yeah, so cool, so epic.
Right.
He sounds like a knight. Like it's perfect.
Exactly. And exactly, you got the master and his Padawan, and and he essentially, the way he teaches Bel is just to throw him into the fire.
Yeah.
You're not going to learn unless you do it. And they constantly make the joke, he's going to kill you one of these days. His teaching is going to kill me. And I know it will, but I will just go with it because I have to trust in the Force.
Yeah. Yeah, I love Loden and Bel's relationship. Honestly, might be my favorite Master and Padawan. Other than maybe Kanan and Ezra.
That's fair.
But they're just so great together. And I love Loden, like, because he does these like extreme things, but he's also really funny and like cheerful, and like he's smiling all the time.
He's very, very Twi'lek, and that is, I really got that from that. I mean, that is his race, and so the fact that he was wrote that way to be so, you know, tongue in cheek, and but also so wise and so, you know, heroic. I was just like, that's perfect with who he is.
Yeah, and he's got kind of a bit of Hera in him, I think.
I agree.
And Bel is really cool. Just this this Padawan. He really reflects the the part of Star Wars that's about, the transition from adolescence into adulthood.
Yes.
Like, he's this boy on the cusp of manhood, and all the fears and anxieties that come with that, but also the bravado and pride as well. Like, he's got all of it, and he just feels like a real person,
Right. Yeah.
And I just love, and the way he sees the Force is, to him, it's a fire, and
Yeah.
that fire can be the tiniest spark, or it can be a roaring blaze. But the fire is always there; it's never out. And I thought that was really cool, and I'm excited to get more from him going forward. I saw someone, I forget which podcast it was I was listening to, but I know some people out there have seen that. To them, they think Bell is, if there is a main character of the whole High Republic, they see Bell as that main character. I don't know that I agree with that, but I thought that was an interesting take, and I do absolutely hope we get some more stuff focused in on him in the future.
Oh, I'm sure we will. Especially how the later events set up what is to come for him.
Yeah.
And so it's just, again, it's just this constant confusion as to how is this happening, and how do we fix it, but also we just need to save these lives. And
yeah, it's so good. I bet we could spend this whole podcast talking about the Great Disaster alone.
Oh yeah.
But just for time, we'll keep trucking along. So they do get through it. The Jedi, they're able to do this cool thing where they all reach out with the Force. That's the other thing about Avar Kriss we didn't mention, is her special ability is like connection. Is she really connects with people? Well, specifically her ability is that she can sense and then strengthen bonds that already exist in the Force. And so go ahead.
She's kind of like what they're trying to do with the Starlight Beacon in connecting the Republic together more, but she is that in personification, mostly with the Jedi.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if I would call Avar the main character, but if there is a character that perfectly encapsulates all that the High Republic is about, it is Avar Kriss.
Yes, agreed. And so yeah, through her power, all the Jedi are able to prevent a piece of the ship with what is it, Tabana? Is that
Tabana gas? Yeah.
Hurtling into the sun, the star, and which would decimate life in the system. And so they reach out and they focus so hard, and they push this thing out of the path of the sun, and they have to do it twice, and they describe it as like a hand reaching out and grabbing it and just pushing it along. And then it was such a big thing that Jedi died using the Force to do this.
And some were made unconscious, like Teami. Which, other side note, there are so many characters in this book.
Right.
It is kind of hard to keep track of them all. But the thing that blew my mind was how quickly I was able to become attached, and how quickly I understood each character, even if they only have like one or two lines of dialogue. Every character kind of lives in my head really vividly, just because of Charles Soule's writing. I was amazed. I was like, there's no reason a book with an ensemble this vast should work, but it absolutely does. But just this what I love about this moment in the book is, you know, kind of macro level, it seems like the simplest thing in the world. Like it's just a force push.
Right.
It's like the most basic force ability that we've seen in all the movies and other things. But it's the fact that all of them have to do it together. All of them have to focus on this one thing, and it's thousands of Jedi. It's not even just the Jedi in the system. It's
Right.
Avar's reaching out. Even Yoda, who's off on his own adventure, which we'll talk about later. Even Yoda stops where he's at and is focusing and helping them. And so it's like all the Jedi, and not literally all of them, but so many of them focused and doing this one thing, which ultimately I think is like the thematic thesis statement of the book, which is everyone is that we can accomplish great works if we come together. It's
Right.
coming together is what the whole book is about.
Yeah, so the Jedi come together and they save the system, save many lives, and we then move into the wider picture, the bigger picture of it all, and how this is not just a one-time event. Now after this, pieces of the legacy run are popping up out of hyperspace in seemingly random spots and wreaking havoc and destruction. And so we move on to learn that is now the Republic's main goal is to find out how to stop these from being, another great disaster. Um,
Well, yeah, and they don't always succeed. Like, and that's how we learn about these emergencies is the right after the disaster is over, or so we think. The first emergence happens and kills like 1 billion people.
right.
And all the Jedi were focused on this one thing, and they could do nothing to stop it. And which is just like, again, Charles Soule just punching you in the gut.
Mhm.
You're so excited. You're like, yay, they won. Finally, everything is good. And then 1 billion people die. And it's like, oh my goodness. And then that's where we first meet the Nile.
Yep.
Let's talk about the Nile. I freaking love the Nile
Yep.
so much. They are, surface level. The most basic description of them is space Vikings. But as Justina Ireland has said, the thing about Vikings is Vikings had a code. These guys don't have a code.
Nope.
They are vicious for viciousness' sake. They literally, they believe in nothing. That the name Nihil comes from nihilism, which is the belief that everything ultimately doesn't matter. There's way more to it than that, but they take that idea to its worst extreme. They're like, yeah, nothing matters, nothing. You can't take it with you, but we can take it from you. So we're gonna go and we're gonna steal and pillage and plunder and all these horrible things. But there's so much more than that because they have this unique way of basically weaponizing hyperspace.
Right. That was wow.
Yeah. They have these things called path engines, which allow them to chart and navigate hyperspace paths that aren't pre-established hyperspace lanes that most people travel.
Yeah, they essentially move through hyperspace in a totally different way, and it's described as being, I want to say they described it as green, and just it looked different than what we've seen hyperspace always as the swirling blue light.
Yeah, Yeah, I believe it was like multicolored, and
Yeah,
it was I kind of got the vibe of like the microverse from Ant-Man.
that's fair. Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of what I was seeing. Um, but yeah, it's like super weird and different. And Charles Soule is described like, if the way we've seen hyperspace work before, that's like the highways. The paths are like the back roads.
Yeah.
These are like the country roads of traveling through hyperspace. And what that allows them to do is they can pop up anywhere, literally anywhere at any time. They can just jump. They can jump onto a planet's surface.
Yeah.
They can appear out of anywhere, things that like you would never jump that close to a planet because of the fear that you might hit it, and something like the legacy
Yeah.
run might happen.
It's terrifying. I mean,
Yeah.
the Nile are terrifying. And I said that in my first notes that I texted you notes throughout all of this. And I
Hmm.
just, after reading the first bit of Nile, I'm like, I'm actually terrified by them. And it and I even said it reminds me of, their ships specifically, more or less, not their actual people, but their ships. The description of them remind me of the Reavers ships from Firefly,
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
and how they're not very uniform, and they're edgy, and they've got these lightning bolts on them as their symbol, because that's their main, you know how they view themselves is the storm. They
Yeah.
ride the storm through altering drugs.
Yeah.
And they also that's how their system works. You've got the lowest levels are the strikes, right?
Yep.
um and then you've got I'm gonna fail it.
Clouds.
Clouds is next, and then storms,
Yeah.
and then tempest runners, or just
Yeah.
tempests. And there's and then you've got the eye of the storm, which is,
Mark Yenro.
yeah, fantastic character.
Oh
um
my goodness.
and they are literally terrifying. It's I'm reading it and I'm going, man, what if this is what the Sith were like? The Jedi would have never had a chance.
Right. And to me, in a way, I will say it. They were scarier to me than the Sith
Yes,
have ever
yes,
been
they
to me.
are.
Uh, and I don't say that to diminish Darth Vader or Palpatine or anything like that. But I think a part of it may just be the fact that I've grown up with these movies, and that's all been so familiar to me ever since I was really small. So seeing, dark side users is, though very cool, like whenever Kylo Ren or anyone new uses it, is very cool. It's never proper scary to me because I'm used to that.
That's fair.
It's really familiar, but this was brand new and it was terrifying. Just the imagining like what it would be like if you're just going about your day, like going on a walk outside, and all of a sudden a storm of Nile ships just jumps right in front of your house. And
Yeah.
it's like, man.
So we then finally we do meet Lena So, which we've talked plenty about. And she sets people, including the Jedi, out to find out how can we prevent worse things from happening. How can we
Mhm.
also predict this? Um and so then it's everybody goes off on their own path. And we just see, the we essentially explore more of the galaxy here again, and we get to see uh more of this whole history get explored of the hyperspace, and how the Santekas, and we get a couple Santekas introduced, and they essentially, you know prospected hyperspace lanes, and that's how we got the hyperspace lanes we have. And so they reach out to the Santekas to say, how do you think this could have happened? From everything we're gathering so far, it seems like it may have run into something in hyperspace, and they're just like, no, that couldn't have happened. But yet at the same time, they know something.
Yeah, I love the Santekas.
Yeah.
And if for those of you who may not be aware, the old man at the beginning of The Force Awakens is named Lor Santeka, and so these are his ancestors. And I love this idea of hyperspace prospecting, that they have to like go out and chart these paths, and it's so cool. Just think about how even 200 years ago these things are still being discovered.
Right.
Like, we don't hear in any of the movies or the shows or anything from the era that we know, we don't hear anything about them charting new hyperspace lanes. So I assume that's done. Like, they think they've gotten them all or something like that. And so it's really cool to be on this, like, in this era of discovery. But yeah, the Santekas are just super cool. This guy and his husband, and I really love them. They live in the house that Anakin and Padme stay in.
Yep.
In Attack of the Clones, which was really cool. And then we get, a hint of Avar's relationship with Elzar Mann.
Right.
And I have never shipped two Jedi as much as I ship these two Jedi.
Same. I couldn't help it. I'm sitting there just like, oh, is there some sort of hinted, little secret love in here? And yes, there is.
Yes, there is. And we never really, that's another thing, we haven't really seen Jedi romance before.
Yeah.
Obviously, we've seen Jedi characters have romance, but it's never been with another Jedi.
Right. I can't help but think about the book one of the characters was reading in the second chapter, where it was a Jedi romance novel, and it was yeah.
Oh my goodness, the fact that we now know that Jedi romance novels are a thing in the universe. And just the line is like, and there would be lightsaber battles, which were clearly representative, or a replacement for the thing they really wanted to do.
Right. And I get through that and I just go, that actually makes total sense that would exist.
Right. Yeah, you have these, like, superheroes walking among you. Of course they're gonna write erotic fan fiction about that.
Right. So yeah, back to the main story again.
Yeah, so Elzar and Avar are really cute together, and
oh yeah,
I just want them to kiss already. But they're on their quest, with the Santekas, trying to figure things out. And then, right after we get this hint, they're like, playing the pronoun game. They're like, but it couldn't be her, could it?
Right.
No way. She'd be ancient by now. I hope it's not her, for her sake. We're like, who is this her? And one of the things, just a writing note, I really love that Charles Soule doesn't make you wait the whole rest of the book, or even leave that as a thread for another book. It's the next chapter that you find out who her is, and I really appreciated that.
Same. Yeah, so we find out that Marchin Rowe is using Mary Santeka or Mari.
Mari Santeka.
And it's and she experienced an event as a young child which led her to see hyperspace lanes in a way that nobody can, and she can navigate them just freely. And just so she's hooked up to all these machines. She's over a century-year old.
Yeah,
and
she's ancient.
And she is, using his ship to just explore new paths, new ways to get through hyperspace, and she's just loving it, and he's just keeping her alive just for this reason, just so he can have these paths.
And this is where you really see how terrifying Markian Ro is.
Yes.
And we didn't really talk about him, so I'm going to talk about him now. So Markian Ro is the Eye of the Nile, which he's technically not in charge of anything at this point in the story. He's not a boss. The bosses are the Tempest Runners, which, going back to the structure of the Nile, I do love that while they're all about freedom and everything, they also have this system of control, which is actually explicitly mentioned in the book, that it's just another method of control. They throw out this, you could do whatever you want whenever you want. Like, they throw that out there, but it's not true ultimately. Like, you still have a boss who has a boss who has a boss. It's a multi-level marketing scheme.
Yeah.
It's an MLM.
Yes.
Like, but anyway, so Markian Ro is the Eye of the Nile. And his only job is he's in charge of the paths. He provides the Nile with the information that allows their path engines to travel through hyperspace in these weird and funky ways. So he's not in charge of anything. However, any job that uses the paths has to be voted on, and the Eye splits ties. And also he gets a third of all profits taken from jobs that use paths.
Yep.
And the reason he's so terrifying is he is using this old woman to find these paths, and he's saving them. He only gives them out when he sees fit.
Right.
But he has this whole database of these paths that he's been collecting over the years. And his father was the Eye of the Nile before him. But his father was killed, who Markian Ro believes was killed by one of the Tempest Runners. But he's using this old woman, just keeping her barely alive and making her think that this is like normal and good. And like, what's so scary is she's so childlike, which really should be, because she was taken. I don't think we get the explicit details, but I believe Markian's grandmother found and took Mari Santeka.
I think you're right.
Yeah. So Markian's grandmother found this 4-year-old girl who, through some means or another, is able to see into hyperspace, and kidnaps her and makes her think that they're doing more hyperspace prospecting missions. And so they just keep this little girl alive. And so she's ancient. She's over 100 years old. She's hooked up to all these machines. And she has like these seizures, which are probably both the result of her age and this thing that happened to her.
Right. And he's essentially keeping her alive, but also he is very cruel to her, and that he's just that much more terrifying because of it.
Yeah, when she gets into these seizures, she'll like zone out and just kind of be lost in hyperspace. And so he shocks her to get her back to reality. And at some points he just does it over and over and over again until it works.
And you see it in him that he's just like, I could end it now. I could just end it now. And yet, because he's got plans, or rather goals.
He doesn't make plans.
Right. He's he's out to do something, he needs her for, for it, he will not go that far, but he wants to. He really wants to.
Yeah, he like hates that he has to keep this. He hates being. I think Markian hates being dependent on anyone.
Yeah.
And in a way, because she provides the one thing that gives him value to the Nile, he is dependent on her, even though he is the one keeping her alive.
Right.
The fact that he has to really messes with him. And yeah, he's just so twisted and evil, but you also empathize with him. It like he's written so empathetically, and it's like, why do I care about such a horrible person?
Right.
He is absolutely terrible, but like with everything that happened to his father and how he's treated by the Tempest Runners, like you feel for him and you want, like, you don't know what these goals are, but you want him to achieve them, even though they're almost certainly awful.
So he's Markian Rowe is just, we clearly get to see he's a bad dude, and we move along and we start seeing, other parts of the plot thicken, and we see what everyone else is doing to, help with this crisis going on. And they've blocked hyperspace lanes going out to the outer rim because they don't know when, more emergencies will happen.
Well, they have no idea what's going on, really. Like, Avar Chris at one point says hyperspace is sick.
Yeah.
So, like, they have no idea if this is a problem with hyperspace itself, if someone is doing this. They're like, everyone should just stay out of hyperspace because clearly something's wrong.
Right. And so that's just the goal, is to figure out what is happening and how do we stop it. And so Kevin Tarr, who helped in the Hetzel system with the Great Disaster by tracking all of the objects that were coming out through hyperspace, designs this massive array with navidroids to help predict more of these emergencies. So the first idea is it calculates the emergencies that have happened, uses that data to figure out where more will happen.
Yeah, and it requires thousands of droids.
Thousands.
Like when he's like, they're all trying to figure out what to do, and he's like, the little nerd in the back going, I have an idea. And they're like, all right, yeah, we'll get you some navidroids, no problem. He's like, no, you don't understand. I need a lot.
Yeah.
They're like, how many? He's like, hundreds of thousands for this to work. And so they get as many as they can. And also, I just love that the guy's name is Kevin.
Right.
There's a Kevin in the Star Wars universe.
And so, but the crazy thing is, Mari is asked, can you, by Markin, can you predict where more of these will happen? She goes, oh yeah, that'll be easy. Let me write them down for you. Boom, done. Yeah. She's got to figure it out like that. And it takes Kevin Tarr and the Republic all these navidroids, and they almost don't get away with it. They almost don't figure it out. To where this array he builds, it heats up so bad that, the systems start failing, and he doesn't have enough cooling systems in place to really catch it all. So there's Avar Chris and Elzar Mann getting together again to use the Force, and they create a cloud, which then becomes a rain cloud to cool down this massive, massive array. And again, the Force being used here in such a unique and awesome way. And they just describe it with them moving the hot air up. Not just, we use the Force to create a cloud. It was beautiful.
Oh, it's so beautiful. And I love, like, let me just talk about Elzar Man for a minute, because I love Elzar Man.
Yes.
I said it on Twitter, but I think Elzar Man is who Anakin would have grown up to be if Qui-Gon had lived.
That's pretty fair. Depiction, I would say.
Because he's so emotional, and he's got these big ideas. He describes himself as a tinkerer.
Yeah.
Like, he's always experimenting with ways to use the Force. And I love his whole thing. He's like, yeah, some Jedi think I'm weird. And they're like, why would you try that? It's, like, not necessary. And he's like, we have the Force. We should use it. He's like,
yeah,
we have this superpower. Why the heck would I not use it?
right.
And so he's always, like, inventing, experimenting, tinkering with these new ways to use the Force. And so when he has this idea, Avar kind of sees into his mind, and she's like, no, that's impossible. That's literally impossible. There's no way you can do that. He's like, all right, bet. and so they try, and yeah, they use the Force to kind of lift the hot air coming off of the machines up into the clouds, which causes the water vapor or the water in the air to condense and become clouds, and the clouds become rain, and the rain falls and cools down the machines, which allows them to work. And it was so much of this movie that this book is so cinematic.
Yes.
I like, on the one hand, I'm like, yes, don't adapt Star Wars books into movies, because there will be too many canon things that'll be weird and whatever. But also, I need to see this as a movie.
Yeah. And so, it works. They're able to predict the emergences now, while the Nile already have that capability, and we see we see one of them already try to exploit that, and he goes out to Eriadu and it tries to exploit them, or exploit the emergence that was coming, by showing, oh, I know where one's going to happen, let me shoot it down. Another one's going to happen that's going to, cause more destruction if we don't stop it, and you need to give me a ton of money in order to do this.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if you know, but Eriadu is where, I believe that's where Tarkin is from.
Yes, it is.
Exactly. And so that is a very proud race, and they're hunters, and they do not take kindly to threats. But they eventually do, forward the money to him, and the Nile go out to where this other emergence is coming, and they shoot at it, and they miss. And
they miscalculated.
Exactly. And so destruction happens, and they get out of there, and now the Republic now know that the Nile are out there, and the Nile are using this, and they will. And so now, not only is it let's stop emergencies, but we also need to go after the Nile.
Yeah, and I don't want to gloss over the destruction that happens, because a moon gets destroyed with over 1 billion people on it. Like, well, it was funny. I was listening to Force Center podcast, and they had Alex from Star Wars Explained on there, and he was mentioning how he's like, I was reading it, and I was like, Eriadu doesn't have a second moon. What? That hasn't,
right.
It only has one moon, and now we know why. Is the other moon got vaporized in this?
And it's crazy. And so while this is all going on, we've got another a bit of a side story with Bell and Loden, and Inira is introduced, as well as
Indira.
Oh, why did I?
Yeah, Indira Stokes.
Indira Stokes is introduced, as well as Porter Engle. Fantastic. I love this character, and I love the idea of a retired Jedi.
Yeah, we had no idea that Jedi retired because when we saw them, they were in the middle of a war, so we didn't know what. Like, we've never seen the Jedi when everything's fine and you can retire. But yeah, it turns out the Jedi have a retirement plan, and it's pretty good. You can kind of just do whatever you want, and so Porter Engle, he's like 300 years old, and he's like, yeah, I could just chill out at the temple or whatever, but he's like, I want to still do my part. And so he's a cook at one of these Jedi outposts out on the frontier. And I just love the visual of just an old Jedi cook. It's just so funny to me and endearing, and it reminded me a lot of John Silver from Treasure Planet.
Okay.
Like how John Silver is portrayed in Treasure Planet. Obviously not being a villain, but
yeah.
But yeah, Porter Engle. And one thing I want to mention about Porter Engle, which will maybe lead to a larger discussion, is so he's 300 years old, and he's talking about how he's like, yeah, I love this new Chancellor, Lena So. She's doing all these great works. Everything's kind of awesome right now. The Republic is finally unified. We're all coming together. We are all the Republic is the refrain that keeps getting said over and over and over again throughout the book. And he's like, back in my day, we were lucky to survive. Like, we were just struggling to survive, which is fascinating to me, because what was the galaxy like back then?
Yeah.
When they announced that that the High Republic was going to be 200 years before the Phantom Menace, a lot of us were like, that is way too close. We're like, 200 years is nothing. And I think the reason because of that is the Knights of the Old Republic games, as much as I love them, and I do, the aesthetic that they chose for those games is basically a combination of the prequels and the originals.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to take place 5,000 years before the original trilogy, and it's like nothing has changed.
No.
And so I think a lot of us just kind of assumed that everything would be the same. Whereas this takes a much more realistic approach to, like, think of how different our world was 200 years ago.
Yeah.
And this is just not quite as different as that, but certainly way more different than I think any of us were expecting, which makes me really excited for, if they ever tell the story of, like, the Great Sith War or the Mandalorian Wars. Like, things will look so much more primitive, and, like, if they were really scraping by just to survive back then, what was that like?
Right. And so we've got these 4 Jedi, and they're essentially a space dog named Ember who breathes fire.
She's a Charhound.
Charhound, yes. And
Ember is the best girl.
Yes. And I anytime an animal, a pet essentially, is introduced in any form of fiction, anxiety sets in for me all the time, because there's just this trope that this animal will either get put in grave danger or get lost, and we won't know what happens to it, and then it will come in at the end and save the day. And it always puts me in anxiety, because sometimes the dog does die, and I don't like that. It's just my personal feelings. I do sometimes look up on the website, does the dog die? It's a real website. If you want to know if a pet will survive, go to it. But anyway, so they get word that a family on what is the planet's name? Do you is this Elfrona?
Oh, Elfrona, yeah.
So this family that's moved out from Alderaan to make their own way in the frontier on Elfrona as miners has been kidnapped by seemingly the Nihil.
Yeah.
And so they go out to try and rescue them, and they get to their house and they run into some mines there that burrow through the ground and pop up and explode. And how they manage that was fantastic. And they hop on these steelies, which are kind of like a horse, but their hooves.
But they have metal skin.
Yes, metal skin and metal hooves, and the whole planet is really made out of metal and rust.
Yeah.
And so as they run, the cool thing is that as they run, it's metal on metal, so sparks happen.
Yeah, that's another part. I was like, man, I wish this was a movie. I wish I could.
That'd
see
be
that.
so cool to see.
So cool.
And so they're chasing after the Nihil, who've stolen some of these steelies as well, and have kidnapped this family of 4, husband, wife, son, and daughter. And they're chasing after them, and excuse me, they essentially catch up to them in the Nile. They prove formidable in slowing them down, but the Jedi, Loden, is able to rip a cannon out of their land transport that got destroyed. And it's essentially the same as the Vector, to where it uses the lightsaber as the key to their weapon systems. So as they're approaching the Nile ships, he grabs this cannon that he ripped out, sets his lightsaber up to it, and fires it and destroys the one ship, but he can't use it anymore and can't stop.
Yeah, it's a one-shot thing. And
Yeah.
I love that image of him riding a horse, carrying a cannon on his shoulders.
Yeah. Pew! And so the Nile take off with 3 of the family members. They had dropped one to slow the Jedi down because, bait. They'll stop for a human, for a live. And Porter takes the mother back to their compound to give her medical attention, and Bell, Indira, and Loden take off in 2 vectors to chase after the Nile. The Nile toss the daughter out of their airlock, and Loden goes, well, here's your chance to finally learn how to stop yourself from falling from a great height, and essentially tosses Bell out to catch this little girl. And Bell's just like, I can't do this. He grabs her and he says, it's going to be all right. I don't think it's going to be all right, but it's going to be all right. And he's like just reaching through the forest, and finally he feels himself slow down and, essentially just float back instead of free fall from an amazing height. And then we truly see these 2 vectors in action against the Nile transport, to where Loden is able to work with Indira, and he gets in front of the Nile ship and flies backward and uses the mind trick to convince the Nile to open up their airlock. And that makes it so Indira can jump in and grab the son and take him down to the planet in her vector. But while this is happening, a whole nother fleet of Nile ships show up. And this is where I'm talking about where the Vector is very defensive, and he's just avoiding shot after shot after shot from this fleet of Nile ships, just by himself. And Indira gets away, and so he comes around to do the same thing, jumps in the ship. The Vector gets destroyed, and he goes to rescue the father, but he breaks his leg in the process of jumping from ship to ship. And they're like, how are we going to go when your ship's destroyed? Well, we're in a ship. We're going to, go down to the planet in this. But that's where the Nile shoot a torpedo into the side of the hull and release a noxious gas that knocks them both out.
Yeah.
Um,
And so they get captured.
Yep.
Yeah, all that whole sequence is really great. I saw someone on Twitter say that they could hear "What's Up, Danger" from Spider-Verse playing in their head when Belle was free falling with the kid.
That's great.
I know, isn't it?
That's good. I like that.
Yeah. And I love. We didn't mention the awesome scene where Porter Angle gets to be a badass.
Yes.
I love because as he's trying to slow the Nile down so that Loden and Belle can get to the Nile and rescue the family, and at one point he's just kind of like chilling out. He's not fighting too intensely, but one of the Nile kills Porter Angle's Steely.
Yeah.
And he goes, "Thank you for showing me who you are.
Yeah.
I now know what I have to do." And it's this moment where the Jedi never want to take life, but there are times where it is necessary for the greater good, for the greater balance. And he's like, "Thank you for showing me who you are and why I have to stop you."
Right.
And then he just goes completely berserk and kills the guy. But yeah, all that whole sequence was great. And of course, Loden and the father get captured.
Yep.
We then move forward. The Republic has tracked the Nile to this one spot, or they got information or something like that. Because Markian has a spy in the Republic,
and
as well,
and so they so the Nile at this point they're trying to stay out of the Republic eye, and so Markian, that's when you start seeing him take up this actual leader role and saying to the Tempests that you need to go do this and you need to go do that. And that's how the one fleet shows up at Elfrona and captures the father and Loden, and so we see a shift to Kassav, who's the guy who tried to extort money from the Ariaduans. And
we didn't mention. I do want to mention real quick before we continue. Before Loden gets captured, and Belle safely gets the girl to safety, he's on the comms with Loden, and Loden is like, "All right, dude, you passed. Like, that was your great trial, and you're ready to be knighted." And he's like, "Really, Master?" He's like, "Yeah, don't call me Master." And so, like, there's that really tender moment between the two of them, where Belle is like, "I'm gonna be a knight," and he's like, "You're gonna be there, so hurry back." And then, of course, Loden gets captured.
And
but yeah, Kassav is there with the battle and everything.
Yep, and he's sent to go destroy the flight recorder of the Legacy Run, which essentially throws this all on the Nile. Like, this is it proves that the Nile are responsible for the Great Disaster and the emergencies. And they had already gone out to try and destroy it once, but that's when the Republic was able to actually get the flight recorder and get a lot of data off of it. But turns out it's a trap for Kassav and his strikes and clouds.
Tempest.
Yeah, his whole Tempest. And so this is where a massive space battle ensues with you get the long beams, you get sky wings, which are like just like a, a, a flying pizza, sort of like very kind of reminiscent of the Jedi starfighters from Attack of the Clones, but seemingly a little smaller and silver. And they, it's just an all-out battle to where the Republic has the upper hand, especially because a contingent from Eriadu show up in their ships and block their only other way out without paths. And so that's when Kassav goes, all right, you know what? We need to not fight how the Republic want us to fight. We need to fight dirty. And they start, doing very unorthodox moves. One cruiser deployed essentially garbage and lit it on fire and destroyed a ton of ships just from that alone. And so then the Republic is trying to figure out, how do we deal with essentially chaos out there? And that's when the Jedi jump in their vectors and they come out and they're able to start to turn the tide. All while Kassav is trying to get a hold of Markian and saying, we need paths to get out of here. Help us get out of here. And this is where Markian steps up and he does his, big speech about how we are the Nile. And, this is all, all to help the Nile. Thank you for your sacrifice. And I am going to give you a greater power. And these are the battle paths. And with these, you can do anything. And this is where the paths get absolutely terrifying.
Yeah.
These ships just start blinking in and out of hyperspace, essentially.
Yeah, they're micro jumps.
Yeah. And they are just causing absolute chaos, destroying ships left and right just by using the hyperspace micro jumps. And they wipe out a ton of Jedi in vectors and disrupt their drift they had, killing Master Jorah Mali, who was going to be in charge of the sector of Jedi at Starlight Beacon.
Yeah, Starlight Beacon has on it the the largest Jedi temple next to the one in Coruscant.
Right.
And Jorah Mali was actually on the Jedi Council, was stepping down to take up her post as the leader of the Jedi Temple on Starlight Beacon.
Right.
And Jorah Mali is also the master of Reath Silas, who is one of the main characters of Claudia Gray's Into the Dark.
Right. And so it's not just destroying Republic ships, but it's also destroying the Nile or Kassav's Tempest, until finally it's down to one final Kassav's ship left, and that's where the Ariaduans ask for permission to take it out, and they board it and they take out everyone on there, and Kassav's trying to see if he can, say, I've got information for you, because he's essentially like, he wants to turn on Markian Row because he essentially led him to the slaughter.
Yeah.
And of course, the governor of Eriadu is there, and she walks up and she goes, I know your voice. I know you're the scum who tried to, take all our money, and shoots him. And
yep. Also a great reference to James Luceno's Tarkin.
Yes.
Because he goes up and he's like, and it's like, I don't know if I should have known, or he's like, I could tell, something about the fact that her armor was bloodstained.
Yeah.
And I read that and immediately went, it'll look better with blood on it.
Yeah.
From James Luceno's Tarkin, and she just stone cold kills him.
And so then, that's where, like, the big battle happens, and people assume now the threat of the Nile are over. But we cut to Markian Ro and the Nile, and him essentially motivating the Nile to become something new and to become essentially his army rather than a bunch of marauders doing whatever they want.
Yeah, so this has been his goal the entire time that we've heard so much about.
Yep.
This is what his father saw for the Nile, and this is what he has been trying to do, is organize them behind him as the leader. And and this is just how deliciously wicked Markian Ro is he set this whole trap up for Kassav, and he led them to the slaughter. He wanted them all to die, but he also apparently got footage of the whole event,
Right.
and he starts playing the footage in the Great Hall of the Nile, and he's like, look at their sacrifice, look at what Kassav did for us. And he's like, we will not let their deaths go in vain. We will become stronger than they could possibly imagine.
Right.
And then he brings out this like vat of blood, which he claims is Kassav's blood, even though there's no way it
Right.
could be. And he like paints the 3 lightning bolts on his helmet with Kassav's blood, and he's like, for Kassav! And so everyone else, and he passes it around, and they all do it. And so they become this unified force behind Markian.
Yep. And then as these festivities end, we follow Markian into he's on his ship and he goes down into the lower decks. And it
Well, first he kills the father.
Oh, yep. He kills yeah, we see him with Loden, and Otto is Blythe is the character's name.
Yeah.
And you know, the other Tempest that's there, she goes, why was this guy so important, this father? It's like, oh, he's not important. He takes Loden's lightsaber and he kills him with it in front of Loden, whose eyes go wide. And then this is when we start to see, this is, you know, we get a glimpse of his motivation here, and he looks at the Jedi. He's like, that's what I wanted, because a Jedi is exactly what I need.
Yeah. And so so that's where you learn he not only sent Kassav to his doom and whatever, but he also orchestrated this whole family capture thing.
Yep.
Because Lorna D is
that's it,
the Tempest runner. She's the one who supposedly she brings this mission idea to Markian, but she didn't realize that Markian actually planted the idea in one of her Storm's heads. He gives her this information, and that Storm brings the information to Lorna, and Lorna gives it back to Markian. He's like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. Wish I had thought of that.
Yeah, just so a Jedi would possibly try to rescue them, and they could possibly, by some chance, kidnap a Jedi.
Yeah.
And so then we cut to, you know, the Republic you know, saying we're going to reopen, you know, the hyperspace lanes, and we're going to, you know, Starlight Beacon is going to be opened on time, just on time, and everything is good. Luckily, though, Admiral Kronara, who was in all these major events on the Third Horizon.
Man, we didn't even get to talk about Admiral Kronara. Right. In the Republic Defense Coalition.
Yeah. And it's not an actual army. It's a coalition of essentially people coming together to, you know, take on, you know, pockets of issues.
It's like an amalgam security force. It's
there
like
you go.
The local security from all the planets in the Republic, like they take volunteers from local security, and they make up this larger security force
So
for the Republic.
yeah, and so we get him finally going. The Nile are not gone. We took out a lot of them, but I do not think they're gone for good. And so the senator who's involved in the Outer Rim was going to say, "We finally wiped out the Nile. We're safe now." You know, is told, don't say that. You should maybe be a little bit more vague with that. And he's like, "Yeah, okay, let's maybe just change it to we are doing everything we can to make sure we are safe." And so they celebrate a bit, and we cut back to Marky and Roe, who now he's walking through his ship, and he goes down to the lower decks. And this is where we see it change a little, and there's just bright lights and just people in prison cells captured in being essentially kept awake by these bright lights and by being shocked periodically.
Yeah.
And they're just in pain, immense pain. And then it goes to the 8th cell, the final cell, and that's where he's keeping Loden. And everybody else is captured, and everybody else is in pain just for this one prisoner of Loden Greatstorm. And this is where we see him talk with Loden and really divulge more about himself and how this whole prison was set up to test a theory on how to essentially nullify a Jedi's powers.
Yeah, he's like, yeah, go ahead and try to get out. And Loden attempts to use a mind trick on him. He's like, "You'll release me," or whatever. And Markian's like, I really want to. I actually really do. But you're not strong enough now. And he's like, "Without this, maybe you could have, but
Yeah.
I'm like, their pain is weakening him so much," which is the most horrifying and perfect way to like, how has this never been done before? Like, it is the best way we've seen to capture a Jedi, and it is so horrific, but it's just so good from a story perspective. I'm just like, oh my gosh.
And I want to take this moment to go on and say, in the Clone Wars, there is a lot of pain, and the Jedi Council even says, we are not as strong as we used to be. So you have a galaxy experiencing pain through a massive war. Of course the Jedi aren't going to be as powerful as they were. If the distraction of pain weakens their connection to the Force, that just makes so much sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, Markian talks about how his grandmother taught him that this was how to fight the Jedi, and her grandmother taught her, and how essentially the Jedi are the reason his ancestors were displaced in the galaxy.
Yeah, he has some sort of history with the Jedi. We have no idea what it is. But yeah, for some reason, his family, his people were displaced, are like in exile because of the Jedi. And so they've been out for revenge ever since. And so he's keeping Loden on his ship for purposes still unknown. And he pulls out this thing. It's like a stick, but it's like a baton made of stone, and it's got like faces carved into it, and it's like starts glowing purple.
Yeah.
And so, we have no idea what this is.
It's got some ancient magic in it, and we have no idea what's going on, and it's wild, and what's gonna happen with this.
Yeah, and Markian, of course, also reveals he intentionally caused the Great Disaster. Like, literally everything that happens in the book was by design. And I just love, he's like, Loden is like, how does this, what are your plans? What do you want? He's like, I don't make plans. I have goals. I have very specific goals. And then I I just follow the right paths to get to them.
And so this is how, and he's asked why, and you find out it's because the Republic have expanded out into this outer rim with their Starlight Beacon and their great works, and he essentially wants to hurt the Republic.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is he, for a good chunk of his life, he says, like, I wasn't always like this.
Yeah.
He's like, I wasn't the maniacal planning, or, well, he doesn't plan. He didn't have these goals. He was fine getting rich off the Nile.
Right.
And just sitting back, drinking, doing drugs, and who knows what else. But yeah, once the Republic got out there, he's like, oh wait, no, I have a purpose, and I need to get back on track with that. And so yeah, it's the Republic expanding that inspires him to take it back. And what's so frightening is you have no idea what he's going to do next, because he even says it. He's like, or I don't know that he says it. He may just think it, but he's like, I could jump my ship through a path right on top of Lena So's office if I wanted to. But he doesn't. And so it's like, why? What? He has the capability to do that. Why? And so, like, what is he planning? And what? It's so frightening.
And so after this, we then cut back to Starlight Beacon finally being opened.
Yeah.
And, Lena So's there, and she gives this big speech about how, we are here to help and we are here to reach out. We are all the Republic, again, that's her big thing. She just wants those 5 words to last through, that she wants that to be her legacy. We are all the Republic. And there's this nice image of them turning on the Starlight Beacon and sending out their broadcast, their sound of hope, and the Jedi turn on their lightsabers and lift them up, and that's the light of the Jedi. And and that's essentially how, the High Republic is being pushed into another new era of, being fully connected throughout, and they're going to build more of these beacons throughout. And we learned that Avar Kriss is being appointed as the Marshal, right? They're calling it the Marshal of Starlight Beacon, in charge of the Jedi Temple in place of Master Molly.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was just a really beautiful way to end the book. And of course, it's then paralleled with, back when Markian is doing his whole spiel before the Nile, he inverts it and he's like, we are all the Nile.
Yep.
Yeah, and so I'm really excited to see how those things, compare and, come against each other. And then right at the end of the book, Avar and Elsa are talking, and clearly they have feelings for each other, and they don't kiss, and it's really sad. So they should kiss.
They set it aside for the greater good, essentially, of the Jedi and this and that.
Which I wonder that someone brought up, like, because the Jedi are a little more fast and loose with the rules these days. Yes, attachment is forbidden, but they let the Elfrona outpost hang on to Ember. Like, they dance around the rules. Like, we're supposed to take care of the team, right? Well, Ember's part of the team.
The Force led her to us.
Yeah. And so they're a little more loose with those rules. And so it does make you wonder, maybe they would be accepting of Avar and Elsar's relationship.
Right,
but someone brought up the theory, maybe that happens, and maybe that is a source of, like, maybe they get together and then something terrible happens because of it.
Right.
And that's why the Jedi are much more strict.
There we go.
about that sort of thing in the prequels. That could be an option. But yeah, then Elzar gets struck down by he's like in trance. He's goes into this like meditative state, and he has this horrible vision of all of his friends in pain and afraid, and he just knows something terrible is coming,
Right.
and that's how the book ends.
It says, the true enemy of the Jedi, fear.
Yeah,
that's it. That's the true enemy of the Jedi. I'm like, oh, that's perfect.
Yeah, I loved it, and I was a little worried reading that. I was like, oh, are they gonna set up the Sith in this? Because like I really don't want that, and I for a hot second I thought the vision he was having was Order 66.
Same,
but,
I thought the same too.
But it's he specifically mentions they're all Jedi. He knows, so it's obviously not that. But yeah, that's how the book ends. And wow, we spent a lot of time talking about Light of the Jedi, which I figured would happen. Because it is the main jumping off point for this whole thing. But yeah, I love this book.
Yeah, I agree. I love this book so much.
So those are our thoughts on Charles Soule's Light of the Jedi. We were planning on talking about all of the High Republic in this episode, but we talked for so long about Light of the Jedi.
It's because we love it so much.
Yeah, this is absolutely my favorite Star Wars book. Maybe even possibly my favorite book.
I literally said those words yesterday to a friend on Snapchat, because he was just like, dude, the comics are so good. I'm like, I'm trying to read the book before I get into the comics, and he's like, I want to read that too. I'm like, you have to. It might just be my favorite literature, Star Wars or not.
Yeah.
And like, again, Soule's descriptions of things are just beautiful. I said it before, I think he's gonna be quite possibly my favorite author. He's definitely done some comics that I've really enjoyed as well.
That's one of the things I was really pleasantly surprised by. Not that I was expecting the book to be bad or anything, but this is Soule's first Star Wars novel, and only his third novel altogether. He's done plenty of work in comics before, and I've loved his work in comics, particularly his Darth Vader run. But I was so shocked at how amazing this novel was. I was like, bro, maybe take a break from comics if it means you can write this stuff, because write more novels.
Give me more of this, dude. This is phenomenal. I ate this book up, and I slowed down in the middle because that's what happens whenever I read books. But then last night I sat down and I got through, I want to say 8 chapters to finish the book out because it was that good. I literally am just I wasn't able to put it down. Part of that was because I wanted to finish it so we could talk about it today, but also like I initially thought I'll read a few chapters now and then a few chapters in the morning, but no, I just sat and just finished it because I got sucked in so much to this.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's it for our main topic for the day. You can tune in again to our next episode where we will give our thoughts on the rest of the projects in the High Republic. If you have anything that you'd like us to cover on the show, feel free to tweet your suggestions to us at blipbloppod, or you can email them to us at blipbloppbloopod@gmail.com. And so now we're going to move on to our final segment, Truth in Legends.
There's always a bit of truth in legends.
So this segment is where we like to talk about something we've been enjoying outside of the Star Wars galaxy that we think has an interesting connection to Star Wars. So Nate, what do you have for us?
I've really been loving WandaVision. And WandaVision, of course, is done by Marvel, which is also owned by Disney, like Lucasfilm. But the main Star Wars connection is Paul Bettany,
there you go,
who is the Vision, and then, of course, is also Dryden Voss in Solo, a Star Wars story. And he just has been delivering some amazing performances. Especially in episode 5. He's so good. This show is just amazing. Some of the best stuff
Yeah,
Marvel has ever
I
put
agree
out
with you.
there. Yeah, I've just been loving it. So yeah, that's mine for this week. I'll say WandaVision. How about you,
I
Will?
hate saying this because I think we said first at the beginning we would never double up, but I think I'm gonna have to say WandaVision too.
Yeah.
That's really the only thing I've truly been, diving into that's not Star Wars related recently, and it's just that good. It gives me a lot of the same emotions and just feelings that I have when watching some of these Star Wars movies and shows when I'm watching WandaVision. It's just, I'm freaking out the whole time going, "Oh my god, that was amazing." And
Yeah.
it's just very fantastic. And so, um, I think that's just a great way to really get back into uh, the MCU, and I'm excited to see it broaden this universe as well. Much like how High Republic is broadening everything in Star Wars right now. So I think that's all we've got for today. We're excited to be with you guys for our second season, and we just want to talk more Star Wars. And we would like to be able to interact with you guys as well. So Nate, let our listeners know where they can find you.
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Hall of Fame. That's HAWL, like my last name.
And you can find me on Twitter at Heckahawk, HECKAHAWK. And if you're listening on iTunes, please leave us a review. It really helps get the show seen by more people so we can increase our audience. You can also follow the show account on Twitter at Blip Blop Pod and email us any feedback at blipblopbloop@gmail.com. And with that, I've been Will Heckaman.
I've been Nate Hawley.
Blip Bloppity Bloop. Bye-bye.
So say goodnight, friend. Good night, but not goodbye.
The ability to speak does not make you intelligent. Now get out of here.